Pierre, Kyle, and Dan. It's the All-Star break, which doesn't mean anything for hockey because it's still the same time of the year for the offseason in hockey. But we did have EJ Radek talk to Craig Berube on the Toronto Sports Rush channel on YouTube, and a lot of things were revealed. Maybe the biggest being, and this maybe changed my perception of Austin Matthews. Said Austin Matthews, very coachable player. I guess that should be assumed, but when you have a superstar, maybe you don't assume that and you say, okay, this guy wants to do his own thing. So that was a big light bulb moment.
Well, I had the honor of coaching Mario Lemieux, and he was one of the most coachable guys I've ever worked with. I think sometimes superstars like that want to understand certain elements to the game. They know they have the skill level to compete. But I've always thought of Austin Matthews as a guy that's got this Mario Lemieux cool to him. He doesn't get overly emotional. He knows he can dominate a game. His puck possession game is good, vastly underrated defensively. They obviously want to make the players around him better. And part of that is understanding how the game's being played. And that's why I think a lot of those guys are pretty coachable.
Pierre Berube was quite a fountain of knowledge in that interview. Actually, it was very telling. And one of the other things that he mentioned was that he believes that Morgan Rielly wants to stay in Toronto. And I mean, as a guy who was his most recent coach, it stands to reason that he may know that best. What are your thoughts on that?
I've always felt that Morgan was going to stay in Toronto. I was not one of those guys that were saying push him out the door, let him leave. He's still got value to the organization. I think if you change the way he's utilized, there can be a renaissance moment for him in Toronto. And I'll use Michael Matheson. I've done it before on this show, and I'll do it again. Michael Matheson was a first-round pick in Florida. They moved him to Pittsburgh. Didn't work out in Florida. Didn't work out in Pittsburgh. Comes home to Montreal. Starts slowly, but they have him on the first power play. All of a sudden, they get a kid by the name of Lane Hudson in there. He takes over the first power play, and all of a sudden, Michael Matheson becomes one of the better shutdown defensemen in the NHL because his role changed. I think the very same thing can happen with Morgan Rielly. It depends on how they want to utilize him. If they utilize him wisely, this new coaching staff, I think Morgan Rielly still has value to the group.
Put us in Berube's shoes. He sees all the changes being made with the Leafs. There has to be a large part of him that says, now you're doing all this stuff? Now you're doing this?
Well, it's not easy. I've been part of groups where you'll get let go and all of a sudden you see some of the positive things they're doing and some of the negative things they're doing. I never blame Berube. I wasn't in the camp that was blaming Berube. I was on the side that was kind of questioning some of the player procurement at the professional level. That goes to Brad Treliving and his staff. But I did not fault Berube. I would just say this. I think Craig's a good coach. I think he's a good coach in the right situation. Toronto, for whatever reason, chose not to go down the proper path. And now I think they are going down the proper path. I think the team's a lot better, and they deserve a lot of credit for some of the changes they've made.
Yeah, Pierre, you can really only coach the talent that you're given, and you can only coach them so many different ways when you're given that talent as a group. But Craig was very respectful in speaking of his time in Toronto. I thought he came across really well. Do you expect him to land in another coaching position sooner rather than later, should he want that?
I think he'll take some time before he gets one, unless he wants to go back as an assistant coach. But there'll be an opening for him at some point. I just don't know if he's going to jump the queue. There are going to be some other guys that are going to probably be out there that people will want to hire. One of the new trends, it's becoming pretty apparent, is not being afraid to hire younger coaches. Like David Carl is the taste of the month, taste of the year at Denver University. Greg Carville at University of Massachusetts at Amherst is another guy. I think Dane Jackson at North Dakota is another guy. I think you're going to see a lot of these. Brandon Naurato at Michigan. I think that's kind of where it's going. Those guys aren't going to get as much money as maybe some of the established guys. And I think some of these teams are looking at that, and they're still very viable, very, very viable and very good coaches. But I do think Berube will get another chance.
Pierre, you know the life cycle of the NHL better than anyone. So we're at July 15th. From a management perspective, what is happening right now, and from a player's perspective, is their summer over? Not that they get much of a summer now. They might get 2 weeks off where they don't work out. But what is management doing at this point, and where are the players in their season preparation?
Management's doing due diligence for the American Hockey League, the East Coast Hockey League, pro scouting in Europe, amateur scouting in North America, college free agent scouting in terms of paying attention, getting ready for the Holinka Gretzky tournament. So there's a lot of management work still to do. Players should be, if they haven't already, should start to be feeling the ice a little bit, should be starting to push their cardio training a little bit. Usually that really amps up the third or fourth week of July. The ice should be not their enemy. It should be their friend right now. So you go out, you're not spending 2 hours out there. You're spending 45 minutes to an hour. You're working on refined motor skills. So it's starting to get more aggressive now. There's no question. This is a time, we're almost at the middle part of July where it starts to amp up, especially this year because we're starting in September, not in October with the NHL season.
Is it true Mario Lemieux said he starts getting ready for training camp, and that's when he stopped getting mayo on his club sandwiches at the golf course? Did he really say that?
I don't know that he ever said that. By the way, I'm looking out the window of the backyard of my house right now, and his house is on the other side of the lake. So I will ask him later today if he ever said that.
Okay.
But in all seriousness, I can tell you this. Jay Caulfield is one of the most industrious, hardworking players I ever had the honor of coaching. And I knew Mario was serious when he started joining Jay's group in the offseason to push himself. And he did. And he won scoring championships. Obviously, he was a phenomenal talent. But Jay Caulfield's the guy that really helped push Mario to the next level when it came to all that stuff.
Pierre, the Leafs, in my opinion, have a very interesting scenario developing right now in that they have two of the NHL's top 100 ranked prospects. Of course, number one being Gavin McKenna, but Easton Cowan still finds himself on that list. And I'm very curious on your thoughts as to whether or not the presence of McKenna could elevate Cowan's game simply from the perspective of him no longer being the most talked about prospect in this organization, and then vice versa in sharing his experience with McKenna going up to the big club and playing in such an intense media market.
I love the way you phrase that. That's so well done, Kyle. So I'll give you an example. Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, Brent Seabrook, Duncan Keith. I was there. I saw it. I saw it start in 09, and I watched it grow to 10. Then I saw it grow even more to 13. Then I saw it grow even more to 15. We're talking about cups in 10, 13, 15. But I saw it all start in 09. And just to your point, there wasn't one young guy in the team. There were three others, and they helped one another out. Kane and Toews, Seabrook and Keith. Two played defense, two played forward. It made a massive difference. And Joel Quenneville knew that he could do that because he could trust Toews, captain serious. He could trust Duncan Keith, captain serious in the back end. But the voice of reason with the entire group was Seabrook. So that matters. And I do think it will make a difference. But one of the things I'm looking for is this is the opportunity for Auston Matthews to take it to the next level as a captain. You know, we've celebrated the passing of the torch from Tavares to Matthews. Now's the time for him, talking about Auston, to say, I got this guy. He's under my wing. I'm going to make him the best he can be. So it wouldn't surprise me if they did a real good job at Cowan pushing McKenna is good, and I think McKenna pushing Cowan is good, and I would expect both of them to be top six forwards for the team this year.
The Toronto Maple Leafs have garnered most of the headlines in the NHL offseason with a new coach, with a new GM, the first overall pick, with the Bobrovsky, even with getting Daniel Alfredsson from the Ottawa Senators. What is left for the Toronto Maple Leafs to do and maybe grab another headline?
Get a right defenseman that can really shut people down. I think if they could do that, that would be phenomenal. Icing on the cake. I do think because there's been this arms buildup, especially in the Atlantic Division with Tampa, with Florida, Montreal's still on the clock, and I do think they're going to be proactive. Ottawa's still on the clock, even though they're trying to be proactive. Detroit now with the firing of Steve Yzerman will be interesting to see what they do with Dylan Larkin in particular. Buffalo is so proactive. It's amazing. So there's been this arms buildup and an arms race in the Atlantic. I got to think if Toronto could do one more thing, it'd be good. But that being said, I would not be sad about the way the roster and the coaching staff have been configured right now. I think Toronto's heading in the right direction, Dan. I really do.
And speaking of all those roster changes, Pierre, if there's one thing that at least on paper right now, it looks as though the Leafs have got locked in, and maybe for the first time truly in quite a while, they have stability in net. And it's
Mhm.
not just stability, but they have depth because they've thought Stolarz was the number one for a while. He's now number two, and the pressure had been on him to stay uninjured, but that is probably less pressure on him knowing that just behind him, they have Akhtamov, who's played at such an incredibly high level. Is there might not be a better 1-2-3 punch on paper, at least they have to still play the games in net than the Toronto Maple Leafs have right
I
now.
would agree. That's perfectly said. I totally agree, Kyle. And here's the biggest thing. The last time Anthony Stolarz was a backup to Sergei Bobrovsky, they won the Stanley Cup in
Yeah.
Florida. So it's not such a bad situation. You're spot on Akhtamov, by the way. What an amazing run. That's why Joe Woll got traded. That's why
Mhm.
they were able to make the moves that they made. Some of them this summer. That's why Samuel Ersson came in and left right away. They're in a really good spot in goal. The one group that I would be looking at in the East, anyways, that Montreal tandem. They're young with
Yeah.
Dobish and Fowler. They're really good, and I'm not trying to be braggadocious. I've been watching Jacob Fowler since he was a young kid. He's the real deal. Like, he's not fraudulent at all. He's not one of those prospects that's vastly overrated. This guy reminds me a lot of Marty Brodeur at the same age. I try to recruit Brodeur. I coached against Brodeur. He's the only young guy I've seen that is really like Brodeur. And I don't know if he'll ever be as good, but there's a lot of similarities.
You know what I'm happy for? Leaf fans. For the first time in maybe 10 years with Bobrovsky and net, Leaf fans don't have to try convince themselves and convince others that the hodgepodge that they've put together in the crease in Toronto are the next 1 and 2 Vezina winners. They don't have to do that anymore. So much mental space has been cleared for Leaf fans because of the signing of Bobrovsky.
Perfect. I'm so happy for them as well. I think Bobrovsky's going to come there and deliver. I really do, Dan. I talked to Kyle maybe 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago about this. I don't think people realize, but Bobrovsky wants to prove some people wrong
Yeah.
too. He could have gone to a lot of places. He chose to come to Toronto. He probably could have got more money, let's say, in Edmonton. He chose to come to Toronto. He clearly thinks that there's an opportunity to win there. And I'm not saying Edmonton doesn't, but I just think there's a better opportunity to win in Toronto than there might be in Edmonton. We'll see.
And you become a god if you win a cup in Toronto.
If you ever win in Toronto, just get the team to the final. How about just get the team to the Eastern Conference final? They might put a plaque up in front of the arena of you. So I'm really excited for Leaf fans because I do think Bobrovsky's a difference maker. I really do.
Yeah, and it's something to be said about a guy who would intentionally throw himself into the fire like this. That's a competitive type of guy that the Toronto Maple Leafs teams really, really need. And you mentioned the Montreal Canadiens. That is still a young, fast, hungry team. They're going to be relevant for a while now. There's been a lot of retooling across this Eastern Conference in the offseason. The Leafs were not alone in doing so. But what does this Toronto Maple Leafs team need? The roster changes are one thing, but they haven't skated once together. So what does this team need to be competitive in the East and get back into the playoffs immediately?
Establish an identity right away that there's going to be no easy outs anytime you play Toronto. They're going to be stout defensively. They're going to be physical on the forecheck. The guys are going to understand their role. Training camp for a lot of teams is important, but for some teams it's more important. I think this year in particular, new coaching staff, questions about who they hired as a coach. I personally don't have any questions, but I know the fan base does. Get off to a good start, and that starts with an elite training camp. Make sure every single player understands exactly what you expect from them and how they're going to be deployed. And if you do that and everybody's singing from the same songbook, you got a chance to have a very good start, and that's the key. You can't be chasing this thing from behind. One of the underrated, and I personally think only 3 teams from the Metro will make it. I think 5 teams from the Atlantic will make the playoffs. One of the teams that's made significant moves and put themselves in a good spot is Washington. They're in the other division, but Washington's going to be a beast. And you know that most of those guys that are going back there, once Ovechkin resigned, they knew there was a mission. And the mission was to go as deep as they could in probably what will be Ovechkin's last year.
Got anything else, Kyle, before I point at a card?
I have been sitting, anticipating desperately for you to point at that card for the last 10 minutes. Go for it, Dan.
1 degree of Pierre McGuire. We find out his connection to a player that I point at. Okay. This is a top prospects card. This might stump you. Shane Stevenson.
That's
And
a
it
long
looks like
time.
he was drafted by the Boston Bruins.
That's a long time ago. Shane would have been with the Bruins when I was in Pittsburgh and Hartford. More of an offensive type player, never really got to the level that he should have. But yeah, no, I'm very familiar. Did not know him very well as a person, but definitely knew of him when he was playing in the league.
Okay, let's see if he played any games. Did he make it to the NHL?
He did.
Okay, so he played 27 games total in the NHL. Yeah, 14 with the Bruins, a few with the 5 more with the Bruins, and then 14 with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Sorry, 8 with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Okay,
You got it.
There you go. You did it. Good job,
Yeah,
buddy.
I thought you had him today, Dan. I honestly, I thought you had him.
seriously
That
did.
was in my wheelhouse. That was good. That was
From
one I was-
Aurora, Ontario. Shane
That is
Stevenson.
correct. He was from Aurora.
Good job, buddy. There's no stumping you.
Oh, I love being with you guys. It's so much fun.
See you soon, Pierre.
Yeah.
Take care, man. Thank you.